The first time I realized something was off was when a guy in a hard hat showed up in my field with a clipboard, claiming he was surveying for future residential development. I laughed and pointed to the "No Trespassing" sign. He didn't laugh back. "My name's Marshall Stokes," I told him. "And this land's been in my family for 4 generations. You're either lost or you're about to get sued." He blinked. "You're not with the Oak Ridge HOA?" "No," I said slowly. "I live on the edge of it, but my land's not part of your little coven." He glanced at his clipboard. "According to this, these 1,500 acres were sold to the Oak Ridge Development Committee last month." I froze. "Sold by who?" That's when I heard her voice sharp, nasal, and full of fake authority. "Excuse me, sir, you're interrupting an HOA-sanctioned project." I turned around and there she was, Brenda Bartlett, president of the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association. Short, bleach-blonde bob, big sunglasses, clipboard clutched like a holy relic. She walked like she owned the land beneath her feet, and apparently she believed she did. "Brenda," I said, "why is there a surveyor in my field?" "Oh, Marshall, don't be dramatic," she said, waving her hand like I was a toddler begging for candy. "The land was unused, unregistered properly, and the board voted unanimously to acquire it for community expansion." "You mean steal it," I said. "Don't be ridiculous. We filed the paperwork. It's perfectly legal." "You really should have attended our meetings." "Brenda," I said, stepping closer, "this land has its own deed. It's not under Oak Ridge jurisdiction. You have no right to touch it." She looked annoyed. "Then take it up with county records." "But until then, the HOA owns that land." I drove straight to the county clerk's office. Took me less than an hour to confirm what I already knew. I still owned every inch of that land. But then I saw something else. A forged quitclaim deed filed under my name. With a signature that looked like a drunk toddler wrote it. The buyer, Oak Ridge HOA, signed by Brenda Bartlett, president. They faked a deed. They stole 1,500 acres of my land. I didn't get mad. I got to work. I called in a friend of mine from college, Victor, now a real estate fraud attorney. He reviewed the documents and whistled low. "This is felony-grade forgery, Marshall. If you play this right, not only can you sue their entire board, but you might be able to reverse everything they've touched." "Everything?" I asked. He nodded. "Including their own homes. If they used HOA funds to buy anything under false pretense, you might just have legal standing to liquidate assets." I smiled. Brenda had picked the wrong guy to steal from. She wanted to sell my land. Fine. I was about to sell every last house in Oak Ridge legally. HOA story, HOA stories, Homeowners Association stories. The next morning, I stood in line at the sheriff's office with a manila folder under one arm and a USB drive in my pocket. I wasn't asking for help, I was filing a criminal complaint. Victor had already reviewed the forged documents and helped me prepare the affidavit, along with a notarized letter of ownership and a certified copy of the original deed, pulled straight from the county archives. When Deputy Ramirez saw the paperwork, he raised his eyebrows. "You're saying the Oak Ridge HOA submitted a fake quitclaim deed under your name?" "They didn't just submit it," I said. "They had it recorded. That alone makes it a felony." He flipped through the folder slowly, then leaned back in his chair. "You got proof of your signature anywhere else for comparison?" "I brought 3, I said, handing over a stack of documents, my mortgage agreement, a concealed carry renewal form, and a notarized lease from a hunting cabin I'd rented out last year. All signed in front of witnesses. All legal." He called in the sheriff personally. Within an hour, 2 investigators were dispatched to the Oak Ridge HOA office with a warrant to seize all title transfer documents filed in the last 6 months. Brenda wasn't there when they arrived. According to one of the maintenance guys, she had a board retreat that morning. I already knew where she was. I drove straight to the Oak Ridge Country Club, where the board liked to hold their little planning sessions. Sure enough, her Lexus was parked out front, right next to the vice president's BMW. I stepped through the double glass doors and into a room full of khaki slacks and pearl earrings. Brenda was seated at the head of a polished oak table, gesturing dramatically at a blueprint laid out in front of her. "I'm going to need everyone to pause for just a moment," I said, my voice echoing off the high ceiling. Brenda jerked her head up. "This is a private meeting." "Not anymore," I said. "The sheriff's department is currently raiding your office." The room fell silent. Vice President Hal Jenkins leaned forward, jaw tightening. "What's this about? You filed a forged deed," I said directly to Brenda. "You committed real estate fraud. That blueprint you're so excited about, it's worthless." Brenda stood up so fast her chair wobbled. "You shouldn't even be here." "I'm here because you tried to steal my land and sell it to corporate developers. And now you're gonna answer for it." She opened her mouth, probably to deny everything, when her phone started buzzing violently on the table. She stared at it, then picked it up. Her face went pale. "They're requesting we turn over all financial records," she whispered to no one in particular. I turned and walked out without another word. By the end of the day, the HOA office was sealed. A temporary injunction was placed on all pending sales connected to the association. And Brenda. She was served a notice of investigation for felony forgery, wire fraud, and attempted unlawful conveyance of property. But that was only the beginning. Victor and I filed a civil suit the next morning. We named not just Brenda, but the entire board of directors. Turns out, several of them had signed off on the fake deed as witnesses, despite it never having been signed in their presence. That made them co-conspirators. We also subpoenaed the HOA's financial records, and that's when things got interesting. They weren't just planning to sell my land, they had already accepted over $2 million in development deposits from a real estate firm based in Tampa. Money that had been funneled into a separate account, not listed on any official HOA budget. Brenda and her inner circle had been siphoning funds for months, disguising them as infrastructure expenses. Victor called me that night. "We've got them. Wire fraud, money laundering, forgery, it's a house of cards. You're not just going to get your land back. You're going to take theirs." I didn't respond right away. I was sitting on my porch watching the sun dip below the tree line. That land meant more to me than money. It was my family's legacy, and they'd tried to sell it off like it was a vacant lot. A week later, the court granted our motion for asset discovery. That meant we could legally trace every transaction tied to the forged deed and freeze assets if necessary. The HOA's bank accounts were locked, their legal fund seized, their property titles flagged for potential civil forfeiture. But the real kicker came when we discovered that the HOA had used pooled homeowner dues to secure a short-term loan collateralized by projected profits from the illegal land sale. That loan had been used to pay off personal credit cards, buy new vehicles, and in one case, fund a luxury vacation to Aruba. All of which violated both HOA bylaws and federal law. Victor filed a motion to place a lien on all board member properties. We served each one during a special emergency meeting they'd scheduled to discuss crisis strategy. When the process server walked in with a stack of envelopes, you could hear a pin drop. Brenda tried to stall. "This is an act of aggression. You're trying to dismantle our community from the inside." "No," I said. "I'm holding thieves accountable." The judge approved the lien freeze within 72 hours. Brenda's house, Hal's condo, even the secretary's lakefront cabin all locked under court order. They couldn't sell, refinance, or even list them. And if they lost the civil case, those homes could be liquidated to pay restitution. But I wasn't just after revenge. I held a town meeting at the community center, technically outside the HOA's jurisdiction, but close enough for everyone to attend. I showed the evidence. The deeds, the wire transfers, the fake signatures, I laid it all out, piece by piece. People were stunned. Mr. and Mrs. Colburn, who'd lived there since the 80s, stood up and asked, "Is there any way to dissolve the HOA completely?" Victor answered for me. "Yes. If more than 2/3 of residents vote to dissolve, and if criminal activity by the board is proven, you have legal grounds to disband. We passed the resolution within 5 days. Brenda tried to fight it, of course. Filed her own motion claiming character assassination and emotional distress. The judge threw it out before lunch. The civil case is still pending, but the state has already pressed criminal charges. Meanwhile, I've worked with the county to re-establish the original boundaries of my land, and I'm in the process of registering it as a conservation easement untouchable by any future development scheme. As for Oak Ridge, it's no longer under HOA control. The residents now operate as a voluntary neighborhood association with open financial records and elected leadership. No more secret meetings, no more power-hungry tyrants with clipboards, and the best part. The same development firm that once paid Brenda and her cronies is now negotiating with me for a much smaller parcel, on my terms, with strict environmental safeguards and a community benefits agreement that actually supports the people who live nearby. Funny how things work out when you play by the real rules, or know how to enforce them. A week after the court froze the HOA's assets, I got a call from Detective Laramie with the county's Financial Crimes Division. He spoke like a man who'd been living on black coffee and subpoenas. "We ran the financials you and your attorney submitted. There's more than just real estate fraud here. I need you to come down to the station." When I arrived, he slid a thick case file across the table. Inside were screenshots of encrypted emails, bank transfers routed through shell companies, and a ledger that didn't just list payments, it itemized bribes. "Where did these come from?" I asked. "We got access to the HOA's internal cloud storage. One of the tech contractor's independent guy named Nolan saw your court case in the news and gave us a tip. Said he was paid extra to disable audit logs and remove off-book documents from public access." The detective tapped the ledger. "This isn't just misuse of dues. This is racketeering." I leaned back, stunned. "Who's involved?" 7 members of the board, including Bartlett, also a developer under federal scrutiny in Florida. "You were the start of it, but this web's a lot wider than your land." He pulled out a photograph, an aerial shot of a gated neighborhood 3 counties over. "They've pulled this before. Annexed a plot, falsified ownership, then flipped it to a shell company they control, different name every time. We've identified 5 properties where this scam was run. You're the first to fight back before the sale closed." I sat there processing. I'd been angry before, now I was livid. What happens next? "We're coordinating with the state attorney general. A RICO investigation is being opened. But we're going to need testimony from you, your attorney, and anyone else who's been approached or threatened." I nodded. "You'll have it." That night, I met with Victor again, this time at his office downtown. He was already building a timeline of the HOA's operations going back 3 years. He'd uncovered a pattern. Each time a board election was scheduled, Bartlett and her inner circle would postpone it, citing procedural reviews. Most residents didn't question it, especially since the HOA newsletter made everything seem above board. Victor clicked through a slideshow of scanned documents. They created fake subcommittees to give the illusion of transparency. They held votes during the day on weekdays when most residents were at work. They even manipulated the voting tallies. One guy, Ronnie Feldman, reported voting against a property assessment increase, only to find out his vote had been marked as yes. "Is he willing to talk?" "He's waiting outside." I met Feldman in the lobby. Mid-50s, former Navy corpsman, walked with a limp from a motorcycle accident. He looked tired but resolute. "Bartlett came to my door last year," he said. "Told me I owed back dues for infrastructure improvements. I asked to see documentation. Next week my mailbox was smashed, my front fence was tagged, and my water was mysteriously shut off for maintenance. I've been keeping records ever since." He handed me a binder. Every page was dated with photos, incident reports, and correspondence. He had even installed a trail cam facing his driveway. One image showed a board member in an HOA-branded windbreaker dumping what looked like paint across Feldman's front steps at midnight. Victor flipped through it silently, then gave a low whistle. "This is gold." We added Feldman's testimony to the civil case, and Detective Laramie brought him in as a witness for the criminal side. Within days, 3 more residents came forward with similar stories: fabricated fines, threats of foreclosure, anonymous complaints that conveniently aligned with HOA agendas. The court granted us a motion to form a class action suit. The plaintiffs? 47 homeowners. Victor filed for summary judgment to dissolve the HOA's corporate charter based on criminal conduct. The judge scheduled a hearing. Meanwhile, Bartlett tried to fight back in her own way. Her lawyer filed a motion to suppress the financial documents obtained from the cloud drive, claiming unlawful access. It didn't go well. The judge reviewed the contractor's deposition, which included an email chain where Bartlett explicitly instructed him to sanitize records and purge non-essential logs. He denied the motion with prejudice. Then came the raid. I was watching the local news over coffee when I saw them: state troopers, county investigators, and 2 agents from the Office of the Inspector General marching into the Oak Ridge HOA's administrative building. They carried boxes, hard drives, and 2 laptops marked as evidence. Brenda Bartlett was escorted out in cuffs, wearing a blazer and pearls like she was heading to brunch. The press conference came 2 hours later. The state attorney general stood at the podium, flanked by officials. "This is not an isolated incident," she said. "This is a criminal enterprise masked as a homeowners association. Through fraud, coercion, and financial abuse, this board exploited residents and stole land they had no right to touch. Today, we begin the process of justice." I spent the next few days helping coordinate testimony. Victor and I worked around the clock, preparing witnesses and organizing documentation. The HOA's defense team, now reduced to a skeleton crew, tried to delay the hearing. It didn't work. The judge opened the session by reading the charges aloud: conspiracy to commit fraud, falsification of public records, wire fraud, money laundering, and criminal misappropriation of funds. When Victor took the floor, he didn't start with legalese. He pulled up a slideshow of the land, my land photos going back to the 1920s. Black and white shots of my great-grandfather building the first fence line. A certificate from the State Agricultural Board recognizing our family's stewardship. Then he showed the forged deed, side by side with my actual signature. This wasn't a clerical error. This was a calculated theft. He walked through each fraudulent transaction, each shell company, each payment made to board members' personal accounts. He ended with a statement from one of the elderly residents, a woman named Martha who had lost her savings to an emergency home repair levy that never happened. Her quote was simple: "They treated us like piggy banks with front porches." The judge ruled from the bench. The HOA's corporate charter was revoked. All board members were barred from serving in any fiduciary or administrative role within a community organization for the rest of their lives. Their homes, now under lien, were ordered to be sold at public auction to repay damages. Victor turned to me outside the courthouse. "You just made legal history, Marshal. This is going to be cited for years." I nodded. "Good, let it be a warning." The media coverage exploded. Local stations ran features on the land that fought back. A regional legal journal asked Victor to write an article on the case. Even the Attorney General's office issued a public commendation, but I wasn't interested in press. I spent the next month helping the new neighborhood council set up a transparent system: voluntary dues, open books, no forced penalties. Anyone could attend meetings. Budgets were public, no power plays, the land. I put half of it under a conservation program that provided tax credits in exchange for permanent protection. The other half, I leased to a local nonprofit that ran agricultural education programs for schools. As for the homes sold at auction, some went to new families. Others were bought by the very residents who had been extorted at fair market value, with help from a community fund victor, and I helped establish using part of the court winnings. Oak Ridge changed. It stopped being a gated fortress of control and became a real neighborhood. One where people waved instead of watched, where fences meant privacy, not power, and Brenda, she took a plea deal. 5 years, no parole. Her last words before sentencing weren't an apology. They were, "I was just doing what everyone else does." That might have been true once, but not anymore. The first foreclosure auction was held in a courthouse parking lot under a blue canopy tent, surrounded by a ring of news vans and residents bundled in coats. People wore expressions that hovered between disbelief and grim satisfaction. I stood quietly off to the side, hands in my jacket pockets, watching as the auctioneer read off the parcels one by one like he was calling bingo numbers. Brenda's colonial-style house was the first to go. A young couple from the next town over placed the final bid. They'd been priced out of the housing market for years until now. They didn't know the history. They just wanted a home. That was fine by me. By the end of the afternoon, 6 former board members' homes were sold. Proceeds were placed in escrow to fulfill the court's restitution orders. The remaining properties, 3 rentals and a lakeside duplex that had been fraudulently deeded into the HOA's shell company, were seized outright and reclassified as community trust assets. Victor and I had worked with the new neighborhood council to establish a rotating ownership model for those. Families displaced by the HOA's illegal liens would be the first to move in, rent-free for 2 years, followed by a low-interest buy-in option. It wasn't just payback, it was repair. 2 weeks later, we received the final ruling from the state civil court. Full dissolution of the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association corporate entity, with permanent injunctions against reconstitution. All remaining funds, just under $400,000, were allocated to legal reimbursements and community redevelopment grants. That same morning, I got a call from a woman named Camilla Dawson. She introduced herself as a federal agent with the Real Estate Integrity Task Force, a division I hadn't even known existed. "I've been assigned to consolidate your case with 3 others in the Southeast region," she said. "It's part of a coordinated effort to identify patterns of HOA-centered fraud." I asked how many other communities had been affected. "More than a dozen," she said. "Most didn't catch on until long after the damage was done." She asked if I'd be willing to testify in a federal probe. I said yes before she finished the sentence. Over the next month, I was deposed twice and sat in on 2 closed-door meetings with federal attorneys. They were building a sweeping indictment that reached far beyond Oak Ridge, tying in real estate brokers, escrow officers, and a syndicate of developers operating under a rotating list of LLCs. Brenda's plea deal unraveled when investigators found an offshore account in the Caymans linked to a cousin who'd never lived in the state. The feds filed new charges: conspiracy to commit wire fraud across state lines and laundering proceeds through international financial institutions. Her 5-year deal was revoked. She now faced a mandatory minimum of 15. Meanwhile, Hal Jenkins, the former vice president, flipped. During a recorded interview, he admitted the board had received monthly wire transfers from a consultant who'd promised to turn Oak Ridge into a prototype for automated residential zoning. In exchange, the board had handed over property rights, forged municipal documents, and green-lighted illegal purchases with HOA funds. It was a scheme to inflate property values artificially, generate investment buzz, then flip the entire development to a hedge fund. Hal's cooperation earned him immunity. He testified in front of a federal grand jury that fall. The rest of the board, indicted, 4 were convicted. 2 fled the state and were picked up by marshals in Nevada. The federal task force seized the shell companies tied into the operation, and the Department of Housing and Urban Development issued a formal suspension on any future contracts with the developers involved. A wave of policy proposals followed, aiming to place stricter oversight on private residential associations with corporate ties. Victor, always the tactician, pushed for state-level reforms too. He drafted a proposal requiring all HOA boards to undergo annual audits by an independent counsel, funded by a capped percentage of their own revenue. The bill passed unanimously. For the first time in state history, HOAs were no longer allowed to operate without external review if they handled more than $100,000 annually. Back in Oak Ridge, things finally began to feel normal again. The new council, made up of volunteers elected by honest majority, began hosting weekend cleanup drives and open barbecues. No fees, no fines, no threats, just neighbors figuring things out together. I was asked to run for chairman. I declined. I didn't want a title. I'd done my part. Instead, I helped build out a community garden on the southern edge of the development, near where the fake deed line had once cut through my land. We planted corn, beans, squash, and tomatoes. Kids came out with their parents on weekends, pulling weeds and laughing as they chased each other down the rows. In the fall, we built a small wooden sign at the garden's entrance. No plaque, no ceremony. Just 3 words, hand-carved and stained with linseed oil: we remember everything. Late one evening, Victor and I sat on the tailgate of his truck, staring out over the field where it all began. "You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that surveyor?" he asked. "I do," I said, "and I think about all the folks who never got the chance." He nodded slowly. "You started a chain reaction, Marshall. You tore the mask off something big. They'll talk about this case for decades. I didn't do it for the headlines. I know. But you gave people the blueprint." A breeze rolled through the tall grass. Somewhere in the distance, a barred owl called into the dusk. The land was quiet again. Honest, free. I'd kept my promise to my family, to my neighbors, and to myself. Justice wasn't just served, it was harvested. And every root we planted grew in the soil they once tried to steal.